General at the Department of Homeland Security finds the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, or CIS, improperly granted citizenship to 1,029 foreigners from countries of concern or with high rates of immigration fraud, individuals who had already had a final deportation order issued against them under another identity. In 858 of these cases, fingerprints for the individual, either at DHS or the FBI, were not available because the agencies haven't fully digitized their inventories of older fingerprints taken on paper.
This is a case where we had the data, but the desire to grant citizenship trumped the core competency to make the data available in a timely way.
But it gets worse. The DHS Inspector General finds one of these newly naturalized citizens using a false identity has become a law enforcement official here. 3 of them have obtained some form of security clearance. 2 enjoy access to secure areas at commercial airports, and 1 has access to secure areas at maritime facilities. In a statement, DHS spokesperson Nima Hakim said before the report was issued, ICE, the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, had already digitized the majority of the 315,000 records which it had previously identified as having potentially missing paper fingerprint records. Due to a lack of funding, that effort did not complete the digitization process. The remaining number will now be reviewed and digitized.
The White House asked for emergency Zika funding back in February, but ran into some problems on Capitol Hill. One of its sticking points was whether or not some of the funding should go to Planned Parenthood. The $1.1 billion bill is designed to fund research to find a vaccine for Zika and also help control the mosquito population. The bill also included a smaller amount for some public health efforts. Republicans said none of that money could go to Planned Parenthood. Democrats objected, though, and held up the bill 3 times, despite saying for months that the funding had been needed right away. Democrats said women often had no other place to go, but Republicans argued the Democrats were simply protecting one of their special interests and pointed out that President Obama's original Zika funding request didn't mention Planned Parenthood, and the bill did allow Planned Parenthood to possibly get more federal money, although not directly. Many pro-life conservatives were unhappy because the move could have meant more taxpayer money for Planned Parenthood. Some Republicans, like Senator Marco Rubio, said they were willing to compromise.
I think one of the fundamental obligations of the federal government is to keep us safe, including from a public health threat such as this.
And he hoped other lawmakers agreed. The Zika bill is attached to next year's spending bill, which Congress must pass by the end of the month to avoid a government shutdown.
The United Nations is holding their first ever Summit on Refugees and Migrants at their General Assembly today. Leaders from around the world are coming together in New York to address the massive movements of refugees and migrants. More than 65 million people are currently displaced around the world. On the sidelines of the assembly, President Obama meets with the Iraqi Prime Minister. They'll discuss the ongoing crisis in Iraq and how to take back the northern city of Mosul from the Islamic State.
This guy's still walking and following commands.
Video from a police chopper shows 40-year-old Terrence Crutcher walking toward his SUV, hands in the air, as officers surrounded him Friday night. They were responding to 911 calls about an abandoned vehicle.
It's blocking traffic. And there's nobody around it? There was a guy running from it. Somebody was going to blow up. So I think he's smoking something. Oh.
It's difficult to see exactly what happened as Crutcher approached the driver's side window of his SUV, but police say he was not cooperating.
That looks like a bad dude, too, to be honest with you.
You can see him suddenly drop to the ground.
I think he may have just been tasered.
Police confirm he was tasered. Then, 6 seconds after he fell,
Shots fired!
Officials say Crutcher was shot and killed by Officer Betty Shelby. She is now on paid administrative leave.
She is giving him repeated commands. Stop. Stay where you are. Get down on your knees. And he ignores all those commands.
Comply? What do you mean? He had his hands up.
Crutcher's twin sister says he was stereotyped because he was a black man. What needs to happen in this case?
I'm demanding that charges be pressed immediately. The footage is there. The video speaks for itself. There was no just cause. He was prejudged as a big bad dude, and my brother was a father, was a son.
Black Lives
There have already been some protests, and police are promising a thorough investigation.
I'm going to tell you right here now, there was no gun on the suspect or in the suspect's vehicle. I will just make this promise to you. We will achieve justice in this case.
5-year-old Shalawam sits on a hospital bed in Hodeida, Yemen, surrounded by children who, like him, bear the signs of prolonged hunger.
From the day I gave birth to my child till now, we are suffering from hunger and torture, and his condition is not stable.
The ongoing war in Yemen has made it nearly impossible for Shalawam's family to provide for him. Even before the war, Hodeida was one of the poorest cities in Yemen, the Arab world's most impoverished nation. Now, the destruction of the port city's fishing boats and infrastructure by Saudi-led coalition airstrikes has deprived the townspeople of their prime livelihood.
The children with malnutrition, the number of their cases has increased, and so the instance of relapses where they return to us has also increased in the past period, especially with the beginning of the Saudi offensive on Yemen.
The UN estimates that about 100,000 children under the age of 5 in the city and surrounding province are at risk for severe malnutrition. Less than 60 miles from the city, families in a small village have been displaced from their homes, living without proper sanitation, causing additional medical issues.
They are suffering from sicknesses, such as diarrhea due to their environment, which is desert areas and entirely exposed. They don't have toilets, so they're sick with diarrhea, and they need humanitarian assistance urgently.
The conflict has left some 10,000 people dead or injured, 3 million displaced, and more than half of the 26 million population are food insecure.
The United Nations General Assembly in New York City spent the day painting a rosy picture around the autocratic nightmare known as Agenda 2030.
In this great hall, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was adopted. With its 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the agenda is hugely ambitious. Imbued with a universal and transformative spirit, the agenda sets out as a master plan for us to transform our world to one in which extreme poverty has been eliminated and peaceful, well-governed societies live sustainably and in harmony with our environment. During the 71st session, I am committed to a universal push for implementation of all 17 Sustainable Development Goals.
And then President Obama stepped up to the New World Order podium for his final love fest of himself as the President of the United States. As if speaking into the vacuum of space, Obama lectured the international body of globalist banking pawns with half-truths and grandiose ideas, still promising big things after 8 years of diligently checking off the multinational corporations' to-do list at the expense of any real hope or change benefiting the citizens of the United States.
We have made international institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund more representative, while establishing a framework to protect our planet from the ravages of climate change. We see too many governments muzzling journalists and quashing dissent and censoring the flow of information. In medicine and in manufacturing and education and communications, we're experiencing a transformation of how human beings live on a scale that recalls the revolutions in agriculture. The existing path to global integration requires a course correction. And as these real problems have been neglected, alternative visions of the world have pressed forward, both in the wealthiest countries and in the poorest. Religious fundamentalism, the politics of ethnicity or tribe or sect, aggressive nationalism, a crude populism, sometimes from the far left but more often from the far right, which seeks to restore what they believe was a better, simpler age free of outside contamination. These are the policies that I've pursued here in the United States, and with clear results. American businesses have created now 15 million new jobs. After the recession, the top 1% of Americans were capturing more than 90% of income growth, but today that's down to about half. Last year, poverty in this country fell at the fastest rate in nearly 50 years. A society that asks less of oligarchs than ordinary citizens will rot from within. That's why we've pushed for transparency and cooperation in rooting out corruption, tracking illicit dollars. Because markets create more jobs when they're fueled by hard work and not the capacity to extorted a bribe. That's why we've worked to reach trade agreements that raise labor standards and raise environmental standards, as we've done with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, so that the benefits are more broadly shared.
Meanwhile, just outside the doors of the United Nations building in Manhattan, the true impact of Obama's policies basked in stark reality, as the number of black food stamp recipients has risen 58.2% under Obama. A stagnant GDP growth of 2.4% in 2015 froze any economic growth, and the national debt ticked away incessantly, as it essentially doubled under Obama's spending spree on global initiatives and the prerogatives of other nations.